All right. This meeting of the Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee is being held pursuant to Code of Virginia Section 2.2-3708.2, which allows a public body to hold electronic meetings when the locality in which it is located has declared a local state of emergency, and the catastrophic nature of the emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location. And the purpose of the meeting is to provide for the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. This meeting is being held via electronic video and audio means through Zoom online meetings and is accessible to the public with closed captioning, and there will be an opportunity for public comment during that portion of the agenda. Notice has been provided to the public through notice at the TJPDC offices, to the media, website posting, and agenda. The meeting minutes will reflect the nature of the emergency. The meeting was held by electronic communication means and the type of electronic communication means by which the meeting was held. A recording of the meeting will be posted at tjpdc.org within 10 days of the meeting.
Thanks, Sandy. Do we have anyone from the public here? I think I see everyone's names look familiar.
It doesn't look like it.
All right, great. Well then, only one thing to note, and we can only, we can push to the very end, was in the agenda provided. We have normally in the past 2 or 3 sessions been holding kind of a general questions piece for CTAC where we pose questions to staff and also just have general discussion. If time allows, we'll try and fit that in at the end. Otherwise, we'll just forego that for now. I just want to make sure I made mention that as we open up. But beyond that, well, it brings us to the approval of the draft meeting minutes. Does anyone have any questions or concerns from our previous meeting back in July?
Hey, Tristan, I just had 2 quick notes. One, I think I'm listed as not having attended, and I'm pretty sure I was there. I remember the discussion. And then I just noted for item 6, it says electronic vehicle report. I'm guessing that's electric instead of electronic. But that's it. Otherwise, looks good.
It's a longer hand version of electric, I guess. Joking. All right. Any other notes on the meeting minutes from last time? Thanks, Travis. If there's nothing, can we have a motion for approval?
I move to approve with those changes.
Second. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lucas. All right, great. So we'll do our normal yays. Who wants to say yay to that?
Yay.
Yay.
Yay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, I like how you guys are waving. It's easy for me. It's hard to hear a cacophony of yeses. Anyone disapprove of the meeting minutes? No one. All right, Sandy, I think we're good on the meeting minutes. And thanks, Travis, for those 2 notes. As far as for the next piece of the agenda is the North 29 corridor study. Lucinda, would you like to take it away from here?
Yeah, I just had to evacuate the biggest spider in the world.
Oh, no.
Sorry, it's crazy. All right, I have a PowerPoint I want to share. Let me see how I do this without. Usually I have more screens up. Share screen. Okay. So this is an update on the US 29 North Corridor study. The study, I've spoken with you about it before. I've given an overview of the study, and it's being conducted by VDOT in partnership with Albemarle County, Greene County, Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, and we also had Kat and John join the stakeholder group for the study. The goals, so we had a public meeting on the 9th, September 9th, last week, and we had about almost 60 participants. The goals of the public meeting were to present the existing corridors condition, which is the report that was in your packet. It's also on the website for the project. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. And then talk about the study vision and goals and get public input on those study vision and goals. So the study area is from Airport Road up to Deerfield Drive. There's several intersections there. And the process of the project is that we're going to evaluate the existing conditions. assess future travel projections and the development. So we'll see how traffic is now, and then we'll see how we predict traffic is going to be according to the travel patterns and development of the area. And then we'll identify areas along the corridor that are predicted to need improvements. And then the study team will generate a range of solutions to address the study goals. And then they'll ask the public again through another public meeting and a survey to comment on the goals, on the solutions, the proposed solutions, and then they'll select solutions to apply for funding. So opportunities for community input was this last public meeting. We also have an online survey right now, so everybody can please go and take the survey. And then we will have another online survey and public meeting in January to talk about the alternatives that are being designed now. And we have like continuing community engagement through the website, which we will be updating with all of the projects documents as soon as they become available. So the schedule is, you can see, we finished the existing conditions report, which is what was in your packet. We are finalizing the goals and objectives. We want to assimilate what we learned from the public before we finalize the goals and objectives. And then the consulting team is starting to develop alternatives right now. So the next steps are to have everybody fill out the survey and assimilate all of the information that we gathered from the public meeting and the survey, and add those to our study documents. Any questions? Let's my share.
Lucinda, would you mind going back to showing the map of where this is all taking place, please?
Yeah.
Or sorry.
So nope. That's good. Let's see. So it starts at Airport Road. And let me see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it in the notes now. Perfect.
There you go. So it starts at Airport Road and it goes up to, this is Standards, no, it's not Standardsville. It's Ruckersville. Up here is Ruckersville. That's the intersection that goes to Standardsville. So one of the things that came up in our public meeting is there's Fraze Mill Road here. There was a proposed R cut to put in instead of the stoplight intersection at the last round of smart scale funding, and it was opposed by the community and it was not funded. And so the study is looking at possibly doing an R cut again. And the community came to the public meeting and asked the VDOT to consider other alternatives. So they are looking at other alternatives. There was also going to be an R cut at Lewis and Clark Drive, which I think has been canceled or put on hold right now because the development isn't happening as quickly as we thought it was. Any questions?
Lucinda, I just had a general question. I know you said you're still in the alternatives development phase, but any sense of, is it mainly like innovative intersection solutions y'all are looking at, or are there more mainline improvements? Are there transit things you're looking at?
Yeah, so it's been really important to the TJPDC to add transit to the study. So there currently isn't really any fixed route transit in this study area. I think that some of the transit agencies are considering that for the future, but at the moment there's no like plans like on the table right now for that. But we do, like, we heard from the community very strongly that they want to have pedestrian infrastructure there and safe street crossings. In fact, there was 3 pedestrian deaths up in the Ruckersville area by Heatherton Drive. So that is an area that we're hoping that VDOT will consider adding safe pedestrian crossings and maybe some pedestrian corridors as well. The Thomas Jefferson Bike Plan has a plan to have a multi-use path up the the west side of 29 North. That would be separate from the corridor itself, from the road itself. So it'd be like off a little bit for people to bike and walk along. One of the things is if you have transit, they have to be able to get on and off safely for stops. And that is difficult right now because of the speed and kind of, there's not a lot of shoulder for buses to pull over and let people off. And then also people would need to cross the road to get, home or to their destination. And that's a real problem right now with 29 too. And then if people need to walk or bike to their bus stops, we need to have pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure there to support the transit that we want to see in the future.
Yeah, just note on that, I do, I guess, wonder if there are opportunities for at certain places where the bus could pull off, like at the Research Park or Boulders Road, where it wouldn't necessarily have to be stops right along the road, but I'm sure you're all looking into all these options. So.
We're trying.
I just want to ask one general question. One of the land uses that should impact this study considerably is what would be happening with the airport in the future. Were any specific details done? Unfortunately, I've not read the report completely yet, but was there any specific information obtained about the future of the airport and how it would impact that corridor?
I don't believe that there is. So currently, the way that the study is measuring the development and the growth, like the traffic growth, is the state has a standardized growth rate. I guess, Chuck, you can jump in and tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I can jump in on some of this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that the airport's got a long-range plan for expansion, especially on the commercial side. And they're looking at expanding on the west side of the current runways. At some point in time in the future, when there's demand, we didn't really factor in that into our work on the corridor per se. We're mainly looking at growth along the corridor from proposed and continued development that's in the works or in the long range plan for the county. So those are the kind of things we look to establish what the forecasted growth on the corridor would be over the next 20 years. We are going to look at opportunities for possibly park and ride lots on the corridor, and definitely transit. There's like Lucinda said, there's no transit on the corridor, and we are looking at opportunities to tie in with some of the shared use and facilities and bike plans that are on the corridor, so that we can work towards improving those for the corridor. Because right now it's rural, and other than the vehicle, you're not going to go up there. There's not really any transit. I know Jaunt runs Greene County Transit now, but they're not very active on their facilities, and I don't even know if they have any routes that run from Greene County into Albemarle anymore. And I know Kat and John are also looking at extending northward towards Ravenna Station. But we're mainly focusing with this effort on where we can include improvements to support those facilities and those operations, and where we can improve the corridor for vehicular and pedestrian, mainly crossing the road, and bicyclists crossing the road. And address the safety issues that are on the corridor right now, because we're having a lot of, especially in the area between Austin Drive and Camelot. That's one of the tier 1, priority 1 VTrans needs for safety on that corridor. There's also some at Airport Road and up in the north at Matthew Mills. So hopefully that'll address some of your questions and concerns.
Can I make a comment here, please?
Sure.
I'm not sure how detailed this study is. But if we are talking about that corridor, the way I look at that corridor, it's an important, a very important corridor. It ties in with what's happening in the southern part of 29 coming into Charlottesville, and also all the way up to Culpeper. So I consider that corridor as a very, very important corridor, which if we do not know exactly what the land uses would be around this area, I think we may be making decisions that do not fit what's going to happen in another 20 years. I would just raise a slight concern here that maybe some more effort should be done in trying to get some information or to forecast the induced traffic into some of these land corridors that may, land uses that may take place along that corridor. This is just a small suggestion here, which I think could impact what's going along that corridor in the future.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you. We do look at that, and we do look at the land uses that are occurring on the corridor. We look at the county's comprehensive plan for what they're proposing in the over the next 20 or 30 years for what's going to be in the growth area. We've got a lot of growth that's happening in Greene County that we're having to look at too. So part of the concern is we have limited resources with which to make improvements, and the way before we can look at possibly widening the corridor, we have to look at grade options before we can do necessarily capacity improvements to try to preserve as much of the corridor as we can. And that's generally what we're doing for the most part, as opposed to looking at a future plan which would include widening, which currently we wouldn't have any way to get it funded.
I also have a comment. Chuck, had you considered parallel routes like Dickerson between Frays Mill and Austin Drive is currently unpaved? If that were paved, that would provide a potential bicycle path. It would potentially take some traffic off of 29. I know I'd use it if it weren't gravel.
I mean, we can look at that as a consideration. I know it's got a 1-lane bridge across the Ravenna. It is gravel. I've used it driving into Charlottesville when there's a wreck on 29, just as a way to get around that area. So that is an alternative. It would have to be improved to almost down to the airport to make it a viable option. And we'd have to work with the county if they wanted to improve that route.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that would be less expensive than trying to widen 29.
I'm not recommending widening 29. At some point, it's probably going to become an issue because of the volumes of traffic continue to grow on the corridor. And with situations like we have at Frays Mill, we're limited as to what we can do there to fix that issue successfully, and maintaining the signal as in its current condition, without possibly widening the road if we're going to go that route. That's why we're going to look at alternative intersections like the R-Cut for some of these situations where we can still move traffic at a reasonable amount of comfort on the corridor by rerouting some of the side street volumes through alternative intersection treatments like the R-Cut.
Hi, this is Stuart. 2 questions. Is it really only 6 miles from Airport Road to Deerfield in Ruckersville? And second question, it says planned developments and increasing population growth. Is this all residential growth that would commute into Charlottesville expectation every day?
Some of both. Generally, It varies. You've got the research park there on the west side of 29 between Airport Road and Lewis and Clark. You've got mostly residential on the right side. And then once you go across the river, it switches. You got Ravenna Station on the east side, and you've got a major subdivision on the west side up into Austin Drive. And then between Austin Drive and the county line, there's not a lot of development. It's mostly rural. Once you go into Greene County, there's a lot of mostly residential development along both sides of the road up to Matthews Mills. There is some commercial that's proposed, but it hasn't been built on the east side there at right before you get to Matthew Mills. And then that is a mix of commercial and residential.
Hey, Chuck, so is that like the high density development area? Does that go all the way up to Greene County?
Like I said, between Austin Drive, which is the last, before you get to you got Frays Mill and you got Austin Drive. The county's growth area stops like right in there. So this part to the north is not really in the county's growth area. I know there's been several developers that have tried to get some of it in on the east side, but they weren't successful. So there's a gap between there and the Greene County line that's rural, and it's not in the county's growth area. North of that, it's pretty much all zoned for development. From there all the way to north of 33 in Greene County, and most of it is zoned residential.
Hey Chuck, I had a quick follow-up question regarding the safety issues between Camelot and Austin Drive. Is that like vehicle crashes, pedestrian crashes?
Oh, they're all vehicle crashes. The only pedestrian crashes we had were up at Heatherton Drive, which is in right south of Matthew Mills. Two of them were alcohol related, and at night, and I forget what the other one was. So really, there's only been that one pedestrian crash that wasn't impaired pedestrian.
Okay, thanks.
I do have one comment on the public engagement. Are there any other organizations or neighborhoods that are going to be possibly added or considered outside of the airport, Hollymead, the NGIC and UVA Research Park?
We met with the northern area
Community Advisory Committee.
Yeah, Community Advisory Committee, and that's the only one we've really had interactions with on this corridor to try to get their input and feedback on it. And like Lucinda said, they posted the the meeting minutes or the meeting invite on Nextdoor. So we got a lot of feedback from the area to the east and west of Frays Mill on concerns about that intersection and what we're going to do there. So we're going to reevaluate that to see what would be the best solution. But right now, the latest thing was that we had previous this was the R-cut. And we're going to reevaluate that to see if that's still a viable option or if there's something else. We're just limited with the possible improvements we can put on the corridor just because of the sheer volume of traffic on 29.
I was just going to recommend that, the Forest Lakes area, that neighborhood organization be considered for inclusion if they haven't already, if that's not included in that committee that was mentioned. So I wanted to add that as a possible target for engagement. I know that's one of the larger, population areas going that way, and it's at the bottom of that whole map and route on 29. Sandy, quick question. I don't think this is up for any kind of approval or anything like that, so I don't think we have to motion for anything. But before we move forward, does anyone else from CTAC have any questions or comments? Awesome. I think we're good to go. Sandy, I did want to point out that we skipped the attendance piece. I was wondering why we were so efficient.
Yeah, we can go back and do that, but I think we were able to capture everybody that came in. But if you would like me to formally take attendance, I'd be happy to.
Oh, if you already got it, that's I don't.
Yeah,
think
I think Gretchen, are you good? She said she's good, so
awesome.
feel free to keep moving forward.
All right, thank you. All right, well, if there's nothing else in the North 29 corridor study, thanks, Lucinda, for that. And as far as for the next one we're going to is the roundabout operations. Chuck, I believe this with you.
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick here. All right, everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I've got like 9 slides, but 2 of them are like pretty short. So let me get to the right. All right, I'll basically over a brief history of roundabouts and then talk about what a roundabout is, how it operates, and then what you want to consider and then some of the benefits we see from roundabouts. So for a brief history, they basically came about mainly in Europe. I think the first one was built in Germany around 1899. And they were built mostly as this, like you see the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France, which has a lot of connotations and movies and stuff. But basically they were a circular intersection. They were built in the United States starting in about 1905 with the Columbus Circle roundabout in New York City. And that's an actual picture of the one that's there now. So these are accurate depictions of what they are. Most of these type of intersections, at least in the United States, have been converted to other type of intersection forms because they don't operate very well, or they've been signalized, which the one in Columbus Circle, you can see it's got crosswalks to the center island and signals at all the 4 entry legs of the roundabout. So they really don't function like we would like a roundabout to function, and as the modern day roundabouts do function. This is another example of a rotary type of roundabout. It's a large roundabout, a high-speed roundabout. This one's located in Fort Worth, Texas. We don't really have any of these in Virginia. Most of them have been converted to the more traditional roundabouts that you see that are popular today. In 1966, one of the issues with these roundabouts is that they're high speed. Nobody knows on the entryway what the controls are. So there's a lot of merge and weave issues. So around 1966, UK adopted a rule for roundabouts that basically the circulating lanes had the right of way and that the entry lanes had to yield to the circulating traffic. And that basically set the criteria that we use for all of our roundabout designs today, even today. And that basically set the stage for the modern roundabout. Oh, I went the wrong way, sorry about that. Some of the characteristics of a roundabout, they're generally circular. Some of them can be oval. Some of them are peanut about if you've got offset intersections and stuff like that, but they're generally oval. They can be more than 1 or more lanes. You yield on entry. In this country, you do counterclockwise circulation. I know in England, it's clockwise circulation just because they drive on the wrong side of the road. Another thing about them is that the curvature of the road and the roundabout size requires the vehicles to slow down before they get to the roundabout and enter the roundabout. And then the other thing about them is once you go into a roundabout, you don't change lanes, and the lane directs you where you want to go. If you want to make a left-hand turn, you need to be in the left lane before you get into the roundabout, or you're not going to go there. So those are just like they are at regular intersections. Next is, okay, for consideration, you want to consider intersection that have similar traffic volumes or heavy left turn volumes. Those are where they function the best. If you have an intersection that has high angle crashes or a lot of head-on crashes, those are intersections that basically will be crashes that will be eliminated by the roundabout. If you have constraints on storing vehicles, that might be another consideration. You want to put them where you have limited driveways. If you have a lot of access points right close to the intersection, they won't work very well with a roundabout. And then if you have an adjacent signalized intersection that may queue back into the roundabout, that might not be a good location for one. This is a roundabout that's pictured here in Palmyra that we built. It was open probably 3 or 4 years ago. This roundabout, as you can see to the right side of the screen, there's a bridge over the Ravenna River. There's a planned development on the south side, and it couldn't have its access off of a traditional intersection because it didn't have a way to store traffic and construct a left turn lane without having to widen the bridge. So we recommended a roundabout for this location. And they worked with the county, and they actually submitted this one for funding through Smart Scale, and were able to get funding for it and got it built. This is another roundabout in the town of Culpeper, and some of the benefits of roundabout. You get improved safety by reducing the conflict points from a traditional intersection. You've got somewhere around 48 conflict points, and this reduces it to somewhere around 6 or 8. Depending on the lanes, it may be a few more, but it's in that significant difference in the number of conflict points. You also will have lower speeds, so it allows you to react more quickly, gives you more reaction time. So if you do get put into a situation where you might collide, you may be able to stop in time to avoid a collision. They're a lot more efficient than a roundabout, than a signalized intersection, because you're basically just having to yield on entry, so you don't have to stop a lot of traffic. And it operates more efficiently in that regards. You have shorter queues and much less delay. And they operate further into the future than you would get with a regular signalized intersection. Like I said before, the speeds are slower because you're slowing the vehicles down as they're approaching through the road geometry and the entry curves. Life cycle costs on a roundabout is much less because you don't have to worry about maintaining the signals and operating the signals throughout the life cycle of the project. And they also, like this roundabout shown here, can be aesthetically pleasing for an intersection treatment. This is one of the roundabouts that we built in the town of Culpeper. Business 15 goes to the east, Main Street into the town of Culpeper is to the south, and 229 exiting the town is to the north. The town subsequently built a connector road from this location to the west that ties into 522. And I'll show you that in a later slide. You can see here on the bottom, the series of roundabouts that were built there. And that's pretty much my presentation. I didn't want to go into a lot of detail. I wanted to try to keep it high level, but if you guys have specific questions or want to see something more refined, I can address that. I also have some links to videos which we have produced on basically that go through a similar presentation to what I went through, but basically shows you how the roundabouts operate. And the second video is gives examples of some roundabouts we have that have been built in around the Richmond area. And then the last part is the link to our website, which has a lot more information on both roundabouts, but also all of the alternative intersections that we look at when we're looking at improving an intersection. Questions?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, I want to say that in the 1980s, when I was doing some work with the traffic engineers at VDOT, they were very, very reluctant in adopting roundabouts. I'm just wondering, because the reason they had was that the average American would not know how to use it. There would be a lot of crashes. Do you know whether any studies have been done, any before and after studies have been done where safety has been looked into vis-a-vis the types of crashes, the number of crashes before the execution of the roundabout and after the execution of the roundabout?
Yes, there have been a number of studies that have been done. I don't have any listed right off the top of my head. I know the Insurance Institute did a study back in the early 2000s, and they looked at the what the crash reductions would be. And for overall crashes for a roundabout from a signalized intersection to a roundabout, you would see somewhere around 80% reduction in total crashes and 97% reduction in injury crashes by building a roundabout.
Okay.
And like I said, that came out in the early 2000s, I think.
Mhm.
There was a design guide. The first design guide for roundabouts was published by TRB, got to be like around early 2000s. And that's sort of set the guidelines for it. There was a follow-up NCHR report. Hold on, I got it pulled up here somewhere. Oh, I got to find it. Nope, I don't have it. I had it before. I think it's 674, but I can probably look it up on my screen here. It's 672, and that's the second edition to the guide. They're actually working on a third edition, which is probably going to come out sometime in the next couple of years.
I guess the resistance to it in the 1980s was mainly based because that there were no guidelines for the design. But having some experience in Europe of what they are doing in Europe, I was sure that roundabouts are better in several locations where there are some signalized and in fact at some intersections which were not signalized. But I feel
correct. There's basically, I came to Charlottesville in early 2000s, 2001, and the director of the MPO at that time was Harrison Rue. And he was a big advocate of roundabouts and really pushed them education. He brought in Michael Walrick from Florida. He's one of the roundabout designers in the country, premier designers in the country, to do presentations and to basically show people how roundabouts worked. Actually, some of these in Culpeper, he designed 2 of those roundabouts. He also helped us with the first roundabout that we built at the airport entrance to the airport. We designed, that was the first one we designed at VDOT, and he was actually a consultant on that design.
Thank you.
But here, I'll just show this over. This is a shot of basically in the Albemarle area, the number of roundabouts that we either have built or are in the process of building in and around this region, just to give you an idea of what we've got here. So
significant number.
Yeah, we have quite a few.
Yeah,
And
Chuck, in
both
the past,
both in rural settings and in urban settings. Sorry, Tristan.
oh, it's all good. I had a question though. We were only talking about benefits. As far as for negative impacts or reasons as to why we wouldn't build them, I recalled from previous smart application discussions that you need to have some kind of interruption or some kind of calming before one can get into the intersection, dealing with, the intersection near Whole Foods, hydraulic, that whole thing. I was wondering, in what cases is it not a good use case?
If you have a lot of through traffic, large volume of through traffic, basically, if you don't have traffic that turns, it doesn't, because you're yielding to the vehicles that are in the circulation lane. If you don't have a lot of disruptions in the through traffic flow, the side streets won't be able to get in. And that was the problem we were concerned about with hydraulic, was the volumes of traffic on hydraulic without having any left turn movements or limited number of left turn movements. It may make it hard for the people from Hillsdale to get into the roundabout, if that makes sense.
Understood. Thanks.
And we use models to model how those work in time, to make sure that they're going to function properly. And that's part of the evaluation process that we go through before we recommend a roundabout.
This is Stuart. I think in some ways roundabouts have a bad reputation. And I blame the Chevy Chase movie where they go to Europe and he's going round and round looking at Big Ben in Parliament. But I've always liked roundabouts, particularly because, in lower traffic volume areas, there's nothing worse than coming to a light when there's no one there and you're sitting there, which seems like an hour waiting for the light to turn green, where if it was a roundabout, you can keep on going about your business. So I've always liked roundabouts for that reason.
I have a question, but I'd like to show a screenshot so that I can better ask the question.
All right, let me stop sharing real quick here. Okay, you should be able to go ahead and share now.
Great.
A peanut about.
Oh, Lee, you're muted, Lee.
Yep, I'm sorry. This was taken from the Railroad Corridor study, and I drew a red circle here. And there are two vehicles there, a blue one and a yellow one. And my concern was, single lane roundabouts are easy to understand and they work well, but multi-lane roundabouts have issues. So my concern here was, let's say the blue vehicle wants to proceed to basically turn right onto to Ryer Road to continue on south. But the yellow vehicle just got on the road from Hillsdale and wants to go the opposite direction on Ryle. Isn't the yellow vehicle going to run into the blue one when the blue one turns across its path?
That is one of the issues with multi-lane roundabouts. That's why you don't see a whole lot of them. Even the ones that we build here, they're very restrictive, and most of them, we don't have any true multi-lane roundabouts. We have what are called hybrids, which they may have 2 lanes for some of the movements, but not for most of them. And then you'll have like a single lane here. Let me go back and share my screen and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let me go back up here.
Can I jump in with something real quick? Hi, everyone. My name is Kareem Habab. I'm joining as a member of the Planning Commission, and I'm glad to join the advisory committee. I want to say I grew up in Amman, Jordan, where it's kind of roundabouts everywhere. And I think for that picture, the way they had it we drove there is the people that are inside the roundabout on the inner portion always have priority. So if you're on the outside, you always have to pay attention to who's kind of in front of you on the left-hand side. If they want to exit out, you have to yield for them.
Yeah, the way we try to do it, and this is one of the hybrids we have. This is the one we have in the town of Culpeper. And you can see how, in this case, you've got two entry lanes coming from business. The inside lane is the left turn lane, and it basically will go straight through, and then it's guided out of the roundabout. Where the outside lane, they can go through or make the left. In this case, the inside lane couldn't exit at that point, straight through to the north. It can only make the left-hand turn. So basically, the way we do the markings in the roadway, and we basically are guiding the traffic through the roundabout to the points we want them to go. We will even use spiral curves to spiral them out to the outside if we want them to go to the outside. And those are things that we incorporate in. We have very few multi-lane roundabouts. So because of that issue, the one up in Gilbert's Corner in Northern Virginia was originally a multi-lane roundabout, and they reduced it because of that particular issue there, where they were having people switching lanes in the roundabout because they wanted to make a left-hand turn and they couldn't make it from the outside lane. And they were switching in the roundabout and causing a lot of crashes at the entry point and the exit points to the roundabout. And this is a way to try to limit that. If we do go with multi-lane roundabouts, we're looking at what they call turbo roundabouts, which are a little bit different. And they actually can even have curbing in between the lanes in the circulation lane. So, but we're not there yet in our design, and I haven't actually put any in the district other than possibly hybrids like this.
Yeah, I agree, Chuck. I mean, that especially with Kareem's comment, I mean, you'd have to have people educated to know what to do. And I see plenty of people struggle with single lane roundabouts, multi-lane roundabouts. You know, not everybody's going to know what to do. They're going to get confused. And like the one that was shown in that picture that I showed, if the majority of the southbound Ryle Road traffic doesn't have any reason to stop entering the circle, which they wouldn't because there's very limited left turns, and somebody tries to get onto the roundabout from Hillsdale and they have to yield to the left lane because they're turning left, they're going to stop in the right lane waiting for a break in the traffic, and there won't be one. So that means that people in the right lane are going to back up behind them. So it'd just be a mess. I can't emphasize that yeah, multi-lane roundabouts should be used with great caution because there's too many things that can go wrong.
Yeah, with that one in that diagram, that was more not for really review like we're doing. When we get to the striping plan on something like that, and one of my recommendations on that, because I looked at that whole corridor plan that they had, was they may want to look at 2 through lanes for Rio Road and 1 lane for the circular end lane, so you wouldn't have that issue of conflicting movements on the exit lane. And that way you can direct the people where they needed to go within the roundabout as they're traversing it. So you wouldn't have that issue with conflicting vehicles.
Chuck, this may be what you're talking about, and but I know I've been on some where it's like if you're making a right-hand turn on like the first road to your right, you essentially have like a separate slip lane. You don't really enter the main part of the roundabout. It's only the people that are going to like the second, third, or fourth road that actually enter it. I don't know if that would be considered like a true multi-lane roundabout, but I know I've seen ones like that get at kind of providing 2 lanes without kind of mixing the traffic as much.
I know the ones in Hollymead, on Meeting Street. Those are like that. They're basically a small roundabout with slip lanes.
Mhm.
Because they've got four-lane road going to them, and they're basically adding a lane, receiving lane, and dropping a lane is the slip ramp. You can see this one on my picture on this northeast quadrant. There is a slip lane for the right-hand turn. Depending on your analysis, you may or may not need that. It just depends on when you do the design, whether the volumes dictate needing that additional lane or not. So a lot of that stuff, it's just like with anything else, you're customizing the design to the volumes and what you're trying to accomplish with the roundabout. I can zoom in here real quick and show you the ones at Hollymead real
I was
quick.
going to mention at Berkmar and Town Center. I'm following along on Google Maps, and it was a perfect example, like you mentioned.
I mean, here's
that's
one of the ones at Meeting Street and Town Center Drive, where you have the slip lane here, and then you have the single lane roundabout, and then you have the slip lane here. The same is true for this other roundabout here. This is the one at Timberwood and Meeting Street. You've got the slip lanes here that are, you're dropping the lane and then you're adding the lane here. So it just depends on the volumes and the design of the roundabout, what you're going to have, whether you need those or not. So, and we look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Great. Any other questions for Chuck? And thanks, Chuck, for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Quick question. This is Kareem again. I do want to say that I am all for roundabouts where we can do them safely. They definitely help with traffic flow, at least in my experience. I was wondering if they're considered, instead of having like a 4-lane, an intersection with stop signs, having smaller roundabouts on that like smaller road neighborhoody scale. Is that a thing that, what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
I can show you some. We've got one, one of the first roundabouts that was built in Albemarle County by a developer is basically, it's not really a mini, but it's close to a mini. It's in the back of Ashwood subdivision. It's right here. This is 90 foot across right here. And this is almost a mini roundabout. It's a little bit bigger than a mini. We have another mini that was built in the town of Warrenton that basically, it's really small like this. It has a completely mountable center island, and it has a slip lane on one of the approaches. And I don't have a picture of that one because they haven't, it's built so recently that they haven't updated Google with the imagery yet. But we do consider those in residential neighborhoods where you've got lower speeds and the volumes aren't as high, and especially if you don't have a lot of truck traffic, because it's harder for trucks to make the maneuvers through those because they're so small. But they can still handle it. I know the one in the town of Warrenton, actually a tractor trailer made a U-turn at the roundabout and was able to do it. I wasn't there to see it, but I was told that they actually made the maneuver. So I was really impressed. So, but yeah, we look at all those, and there are some instances where we do look at those smaller type of roundabouts. I mean, you can have really small ones to where it's just like the size of a dining room table in the middle of the road in the center of the intersection. Can be really small. And in those instances, the trucks would not necessarily drive like they would through a roundabout. They would go in front of the roundabout making the left-hand turns because it's not big enough for them to really operate it normally in those kind of situations. But for the passenger vehicles and the smaller vehicles, they would use it just like they would any other roundabout.
Thank you.
Cool. If there's no other questions or discussion, thanks, Chuck, and welcome, Kareem. We missed the welcome party for you, so thanks for joining. So yeah, without further ado, thanks again, Chuck. I think we're next ready, Sandy, for the Smart Scale Round 5 Stakeholder Committee piece.
Yes. So as you all remember, I do not have a roadmap that we've been looking at as we've been talking about the smart scale process that the MPO has undertaken in order to select and prepare applications for the next round of smart scale. But the MPO did select the 4 projects that they would like to move forward with. So those were the 4 that we had discussed in this meeting previously, which included the Ravenna River Bike and Pedestrian Crossing, the roundabout, based on the hydraulic project, and then at the District Avenue roundabout, I'm so sorry. And then the 2 bike and pedestrian corridors that we were looking at, which included the Avon Street bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements throughout that corridor. And then at 5th Street, looking at some intersection improvements at the 5th Street station intersection, as well as some extensions of the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And so, as you'll recall, one of the things that we had offered to do as part of the MPO and that we were recommending is that we could identify 1 to 2 of those projects that would need additional stakeholder engagement. And so the MPO Policy Board did vote that the Ravenna River Bike and Pedestrian Crossing would be one of those projects. They did not feel, based on previous discussions with the MPO Technical Committee, that we needed the same type of stakeholder advisory committee for the other projects, but they did really want to emphasize that we needed to put some, substantive thought and into outreach and coordination regarding the District Avenue roundabout, because there would be some pretty significant impacts to some of the property owners in that area. And so while we're not going to go through necessarily the same stakeholder advisory committee process, we are going to be making sure that we are conducting outreach with the Meadows community specifically to make sure that we are coordinating well with them and making sure that they're aware of the projects that we'll be pursuing. But tonight I wanted to discuss with you the next step in the process that the MPO has adopted for its smart scale preparation is the development and appointment of a stakeholder advisory committee to help guide the development of the application for the Ravenna River Bike and Pedestrian Crossing. And so I wanted to have a discussion with you all based on who the significant stakeholders are that need to be represented on this group, and also to talk about what factors are the priorities that need to be considered for consideration as we develop this into an application. What I really want to emphasize as well is that we are going to be asking for a CTAC liaison. It sounds like for these kinds of appointments, we usually start with the officers and then give them the first right of refusal. And in this case, Stuart has provided that he is available to support CTAC as the formal liaison. What I want to make sure I emphasize to you all is that while we will have an official stakeholder committee, this is going to be a very public process. We want to make sure that there are opportunities for the public to engage. So all of the meetings will be open to the public. We will have time set aside to receive and respond to public comments. We really want you all to be engaged as much as you would like to be engaged. And as this process evolves, we will, be continuing to utilize you all as the Citizen Advisory Committee to provide feedback throughout the process. So I just want to make sure it's clear, what your role is going to be and what the opportunities are going to be, not just for this liaison, but for all of you to be able to engage in this to the extent that you would be interested in it. So the first thing that we wanted to do is appoint the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Ideally, this group would be around 12 people or so. We're not at a point where we're ready to identify the specific participants from all of these groups, but I did want to have the initial discussion with you is whether the folks that or the organizations that we have identified at this point really covers the stakeholders that should be included as part of this discussion. So why don't we go ahead and start with that? And what I'd really like to do is just have a really open discussion about what y'all's thoughts are. And unfortunately, it looks like I cannot share my screen and see you all. So
It looks like it's being shown.
but
Never mind.
if you all have the agenda in front of you, this is on the agenda. So yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts this time.
Yeah, we were able to see it for a second there. I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, if I share my screen, I can't see you all.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
I did have a couple thoughts of groups. One I noted, I think Charlottesville has a bicycle pedestrian advisory committee. I'm wondering if someone from that group may be a good addition, given this would be mainly a bike ped crossing. Then another question, which maybe, I don't know if Kareem or Daniel had thoughts, but members of the City or County Planning Commission, possibly?
Oh, yeah.
And that's it
Yeah.
for me.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This is Daniel.
This is going to be related to bike and ped, correct? Don't we have a specific bikers group that is represented with the county and MPO?
We have a bike and pedestrian coordination committee that consists of staff. So they would be represented by those other like staff type positions. So like the transportation planning and the parks and rec types of memberships.
Okay.
Regarding your comment, Travis, on the citizen representative, I was thinking that probably at least one of those would be based on that bike ped committee at Charlottesville.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think you should have somebody that has some knowledge of bridge design, because the bridge designs are going to make or break this program, because the bridge design I proposed, I think I could do the project for $8 million instead of 12 to 13. So I'd volunteer if I could, but if not, you should at least have somebody that understands the basics of bridge. I did send information to the policy board members to demonstrate the fact that the cost of a bridge goes up as the square of the span. So a 300-foot bridge costs 9 times as much as a 100-foot bridge. So 3 100-foot bridges, or 3 100-foot spans to cover a 300-foot total distance would cost 1/3 the cost of a single span to do the same distance. And I don't know that everybody necessarily understands that. So I think there should be somebody there that does understand that.
Chuck, would you be able to respond, I guess, to a slightly different but related question? Can you clarify, would VDOT be providing the engineering support, or would you all be able to continue to utilize consultants for this part of the process?
I was planning to use the same consultant as we used before. I've got to still work out the logistics on that, but that was my plan.
Okay.
One other grouping to consider is Willow Tree. I believe their proximity to this might behoove to have them included.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I was going to suggest someone from the Piedmont Environmental Council. There's like a Facebook group too. It's like Charlottesville Albemarle Greenways. There's like 1,000 members in this public group for bike infrastructure projects.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
It's a little bit on, I don't know, they might be represented, but the Riviera Trail Foundation might be an interesting group to interact with on this project.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That is a good one.
Okay. All right, so then, and we can come back if you think of other things. If you scroll down a little bit, thank you, Tristan.
Yeah, for sure.
The other part of this is that we're going to have to basically create some sort of prioritization system to help us evaluate the different alternatives that could be considered. So this is an initial draft of potential factors that should be part of this as part of this decision making. So the ones that I came up with Chuck and some other conversations that I had were the ADA accessibility, connectivity to the trail systems, the impacts from utilities. So what kinds of relocations might have to occur for utilities that might be disrupted as part of this process, looking at floodplain impacts, potential right-of-way impacts, especially with State Farm not renewing the lease on the east side of the property. We really need to make sure that we understand what right-of-ways are not going to be changed and whether that is going to impact those costs at all. Aesthetic considerations, of course, cost is important, and then also public impacts. One of the conversations that has come up a lot around this is whether this is going to increase traffic in certain areas where the ends of the bridge might be. And so I think we do need to have some consideration for what those public impacts may or may not be based on certain configurations. I don't really necessarily want you all to tell me which one of these is the most important. I think the most important thing right now is that would be something that would happen within that stakeholder advisory committee. But we do want to make sure that we start with a comprehensive list of all the factors that should be included for consideration. So any thoughts on this list at this point?
Would maintenance and repair be part of your cost figures?
Is that, Chuck, can you talk about how that is factored into the actual application for Smart Scale? It certainly would be from the city side because they would have to provide the maintenance, for the infrastructure that is within the city.
Yeah, it's all going to depend on the tie down points, because one of the tie down points is on the east side, which is the county, and the others possibly in the city, depending on where they tie down at. If you hit the Woolen Mills site, that's in the county. So from a maintenance perspective, it may vary. And that would have to be worked out through some sort of memorandum of understanding as part of the project.
So it sounds like maybe that should be a consideration then.
I mean, we've got this issue, and it's never been resolved on Free Bridge. We replaced it, and the city was supposed to take over maintenance of it, but they never did. So it's not that one's not been resolved either. So I'm not beyond that. That's all I know. But that's something that we definitely need to sorry,
Sandy, you saying?
No, I was just gonna say that was a really good suggestion. Thank you.
I had a few more potentials, and some of them may be covered to some extent by the other ones, but one, just kind of generally environmental and water quality impacts, any impacts on the river itself, and then any, depending on the route chosen, any forest impacts in that area. Another is like recreation and river access. I know there's the Rivanna River Company now that runs folks through that area, just making sure it doesn't impede any of that. Then also, I'm sure this will be consideration of the bridge design, but just like elevation of the bridge and any resiliency aspects or concerns. So now when they're showing the previous ones, the fact that one of the designs was only like 1 foot over flooded elevation was definitely seemed like a big concern. So.
Those are great suggestions, and I don't know if they are. Some of them might be maybe indirectly, but I don't know if they would explicitly come out if we didn't include them. One question I have about the recreation and river access, are you thinking about that as kind of more of making sure that if there are needs for access to the river at certain points that those are maintained, or are you thinking of it more as like an economic development impact?
No, more about actual access, like folks who
Okay.
are canoeing or tubing down the river, making sure it's, they still have a way to get down the river. And then if there are any like existing entry or exit points being used in that area, that they're still provided for.
And speaking
Okay,
to that,
thank you.
Travis, I would say safety concerns, because sometimes pilings, if there's any pilings that go in the river, it can cause some issues for those in water, suck them in kind of thing, underwater. If anyone's been in the Hatton's Ferry, they know what I'm talking about if you get downstream of that ferry.
I think, Sandy, one thing that you should include is transit access. I know the route that I proposed, Route 10 buses run right by the end of it there, so it'd be easy to put a bus stop right at the end. So that would make it convenient for people that wanted to walk half the way and ride the bus the other half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's come up a lot in discussions related to planning around the corridors. We need to provide as many alternative forms of access to these assets as we possibly can.
Hey, Sandy, I know in some of our early discussions, especially when we met with some of the other groups, the question came up about parking around the termini of these, so that if somebody was in the Pantops area and wanted to park there and then walk across the bridge, where would they park? And then the same is going to hold true for the side in either the city or the county. So that's something that probably needs to be at least discussed, because I know the Riverside Park, the parking lot's full most of the times now. And if you're going to add this connection without adding additional parking, it could be problematic.
I would also add bicycle parking to that too, in case there are people want to bike there and then go walk from there or take a bus from there.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to ride a bike across the bridge. So, but I mean, adding a bike rack wouldn't be that much of an issue.
Yeah, I'm just picturing, like, I don't know how feasible it is, but if there is a transit route that goes there, if somebody rides their bike across the bridge, like from Pantops, and then drops their bike off, so they don't have to ride into the city, instead take the bus from there, something like that.
Sure.
Just a quick point of clarification: is the proposed bridge going to connect to the old Mills Trail?
I believe that was the plan. Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the logistical things that we had to work out was that the trail itself wasn't a logical termini based on PDOT's connectivity requirements. Am I remembering that correctly, Chuck?
Yeah, we're coming across at a higher elevation because of the a lot of that trail is actually in the floodplain. So we had to come in at a higher elevation. You could probably work your way back down by a trail from either end, but yeah, we couldn't put it at that elevation. It was too low for any of the designs.
Great.
Well, I think to clarify, the old Mills Trail is plenty high. It's the Ravenna Trail on the west side that's too low.
Yeah, because we had to come in at higher elevation on both sides.
What I was kind of doing a leading question here for the ADA accessibility. If it was going to go to the old mill, is that fully ADA accessible from where it would connect? I was just curious on that end. Okay.
It's not ADA compliant at all.
So I was like, then that would require an extended kind of project, or why would
We
we
were
consider
looking
it?
at a trail that ran all the way up to South Pantops Drive between State Farm and the new apartment complex to the east, from the end of the trail, from the end of the bridge.
Understood. Okay, then ADA makes sense if it's paved. Okay, any other questions or additional comments for Sandy to take away for this piece about factors to consider for prioritization and future discussion for this committee?
Yeah, so just so you all know, what I'll do is I'll take this feedback to the technical committee and the policy board. They're both meeting next week back to back. So I'll have I will also ask the policy board for you know, we'll have a discussion about the stakeholders and the policy board as well, but or not the policy board, the technical committee. The policy board will be asked to vote on which organizations should be represented on the stakeholder advisory committee. And then hopefully at that point, I'll be able to start identifying individuals to serve in these capacities. And we'll certainly keep you all aware once that advisory committee starts meeting.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Sandy. There was one other question I had. I believe via emails you were mentioning a regional transit plan that we were looking for an appointment for that as well. Is that relevant at this moment to bring up?
Yeah, so Lucinda is actually overseeing the development of this regional transit plan with some consultants, but we are working to develop a stakeholder committee that will participate with a workshop with the consultants that are retained to develop this transit vision plan for the region. And so what we are looking for is someone from CTAC who would like to participate in that, to be on the stakeholder group. It's only going to be 2 meetings. The first one, I don't know if we've nailed down the date yet, but will be the first part of October. And I think Lucinda is at a 2-hour meeting.
It's 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. And then there will be a second one, I think, in the spring. So that's what you would be committing to. But if we would really love to have somebody from CTAC participating in that, if there are any volunteers. So, going once.
Is anyone interested in taking such an appointment?
I would, but unfortunately, I'm going to be out of the country for the first part of October, so I should probably not volunteer for this one.
Well, I'll do it if nobody else will.
That's the winning attitude.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. We'll add you to the list.
Yeah, I'm going to be out of town for the first half of October. But yeah, no, okay, great. Thanks, Lee. Sandy, is there anything else that we need to cover?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you all for your feedback. That was really helpful.
Awesome. Perfect. So yeah, it looks like we have a few minutes left, and it's not on the agenda officially, but just a general discussion. If you guys wanted to have anything open to the floor, just any questions in general about CTAC. I do believe we already have kind of a full list of things already that we've asked for input and presentation on by the staff. So, you know, we might want to just, it might be a running list, but no pressure on behalf, you know, of you guys to, you know, keep putting up new topics. But anything you guys would like to discuss before we adjourn and proceed into, excuse me, into public matters of the public and then close? No pressure, if nothing.
Well, one thing, Sandy, at the last policy board meeting, when the 4 projects were selected for smart scale, the flyover one that I proposed, they wanted to put that on the long range transportation plan, and I didn't see that in the minutes. So I need to take that up with the policy board, I guess, but I just wanted to make you aware.
Thank you for letting me know. We do try to do summary minutes. So, you know, they are intended to be very, very abbreviated. But yeah, you can certainly request that the policy board or see if they would like to consider that annotation in a revision to the minutes.
Great. Any other thoughts or questions? Great. Well, everyone, I don't believe there's anyone's joined from the public. So Sandy, can you confirm that before I rudely close this out?
I don't see anyone.
Okay. Well, great. If there's nothing else, I think we can adjourn. The time is 8:20. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Guys.
evening.
You too.
Take care.
See you guys.